My younger sibling and I received two systems, a storage system and a vacuum system. Feeling sorry for my sibling, I chose the vacuum system, which is capable of clearing obstacles but drains energy. I worked hard to exterminate monsters and handed over all the supplies I gathered to my younger sibling. Yet, when I was critically injured, nearly freezing to death, and needed those supplies to survive, my sibling locked me outside to die, all just to save food. Somehow, I was reborn on the very day of the system selection. I watched my younger sister choose the vacuum system without a moment's hesitation. As her finger touched that red icon, a crimson light suddenly surged into her body. I stared at him without saying a word. In my previous life, I had used the vacuum system and eventually became one of the strongest fighters. Now, he wanted to claim that power for himself. He wanted to become powerful. He wanted to make me dependent on him again. I almost laughed. He had no idea that the vacuum system had a fatal flaw. It is strong for fighting, but hardly helps in gathering and storing supplies. He didn't know the apocalypse was coming. Food would be much more valuable than strength. I walked slowly towards the golden icon. He smiled as if he was thinking about my future. I touched the golden icon. A warm glow instantly enveloped my body. The storage system was successfully activated. Storage capacity, unlimited. My younger sibling immediately tested their power. A crystal glass on the table suddenly vanished. Their expression changed instantly. Then, she looked at me. Their gaze was no longer that of a younger sibling needing an older one. Now there was arrogance in it. He treated me like someone who was supposed to serve him. I didn't grant a single one of his requests. Instead, I kicked him out of the house. My younger sister was furious and couldn't believe I'd actually throw him out. He even assumed I was still bitter about her taking the vacuum system. I didn't care. I knew that in 7 days, global temperatures would plummet to below -60 degrees. Her combat skills wouldn't save him from the freezing cold. I had been through it all before. I had seen the world turn into hell. This time, I wouldn't repeat the same mistakes. After my sister left, I checked my bank balance. There was only about 11 million. It clearly wasn't enough. I needed a fortress, food, medicine, energy, weapons, and everything else required for survival. I immediately began looking for a safe location. My target was an abandoned cold storage warehouse in Xinjiao. In my previous life, that place was eventually seized by a gang of thugs and became one of the largest survival strongholds. It was in a remote location. The terrain was open yet easy to defend. Most importantly, it featured an underground cold storage warehouse with walls over a meter thick. With a few modifications, it could be transformed into the perfect fortress. I mortgaged my house and company shares. I took out the largest loans possible. I didn't even care about the high interest rates. I knew the banking system would collapse in 7 days. The money I borrowed now would likely be worthless after the apocalypse. That night, I succeeded in leasing the warehouse. I entered the underground area and had the system scan the location. The results confirmed it met all the criteria for a shelter. I immediately activated the space locking function. From that moment on, the underground space became the hub for my supplies. The system's storage capacity was limitless. I no longer had to worry about space. All I had to do was fill it. I didn't waste time going to supermarkets. I headed straight for the city's largest wholesale market. My first purchases were staples. I bought dozens of tons of high-quality rice, flour, cooking oil, wheat, seasonings, and various other essentials. Next, I bought massive quantities of meat, thousands of pigs, hundreds of cattle, hundreds of goats, along with tens of tons of fruits and vegetables. Trucks began arriving at the warehouse, and workers spent the day unloading sacks and crates. Once the workers had left, I stood before the piles of supplies and reached out. In an instant, the entire stack of rice vanished, transferred into the system's storage space. I could barely contain my excitement. This was the true magic of the storage system. No matter how much I bought, there was always enough room. I then turned my attention to even more critical supplies. I purchased thousands of tons of coal, fuel, oil tanks, and generators. I knew extreme weather would be one of the greatest threats. Therefore, my fortress needed its own independent power source. Next, I hired construction workers and ordered them to install 50-centimeter thick insulation, steel plating, bulletproof doors, attack-resistant glass, and various other reinforcements. I demanded the job be finished in 3 days. I was even willing to pay several times the standard rate to expedite the work. Cost was no object. I only had 7 days. In addition to the walls and insulation, I installed a high-voltage electrical grid around the fortress. I knew that after the world collapsed, humans could be more dangerous than monsters. My fortress had to be capable of withstanding both. I also bought mattresses, carpets, warm clothing, furniture, electronics, food, and various daily necessities. Bit by bit, the old warehouse transformed into a fully equipped fortress. One day, I ran into my younger sibling and Wang Teng by chance. They mocked me for selling my house, assuming I was struggling to find a place to live. I didn't retort, I simply walked past them. I knew their laughter wouldn't last long. 2 days later, the fortress renovations were complete. The walls were lined with thick insulation, all windows were reinforced with steel, the food storage was fully stocked, and the power system was ready. The central area served as the living quarters. I stood in the middle of the fortress, surveying all the supplies I had gathered. I was finally ready, then an emergency alert flashed. Global temperatures were set to plummet within hours, and all citizens were ordered to return home immediately. I gazed out the window at the first snowflakes falling. The apocalypse had finally arrived. Before long, the temperature outside dropped below -30 degrees and kept falling by the minute. Inside my fortress, however, the temperature remained stable. I could even take off my jacket and enjoy a hot meal. Outside, the world was turning into a living hell. Meanwhile, my younger sibling and Wang Teng struggled against the freezing cold. They eventually realized I might have a shelter at the Zijio warehouse. They came looking for me. I watched their vehicle approach the fortress on my surveillance cameras. I immediately activated the defense system, and high-voltage electricity crackled around the fortress perimeter. They tried to force open the steel door. My sibling even used the vacuum system, but the attack failed. The door was too strong. I didn't open the door. I left them out in the cold. The temperature kept dropping and their car became inoperable. They were forced to take shelter in a small nook near the gate. I watched them through the camera. Wang Teng finally swallowed his pride and begged me to save them. I still didn't open the door. I even dropped a piece of warm beef onto the snow. They scrambled for the food. I then poured hot soup toward their shelter, but within seconds it froze into a sheet of ice. Soon after, mutant dogs appeared, drawn by the scent of meat. One of the monsters lunged at my sibling, but the vacuum system finally unleashed its power. A burst of red light exploded, obliterating the monster's head. I watched it all from inside the fortress. My sibling's ability had finally awakened, yet despite possessing such power, they still lacked food and shelter. I stopped caring about them. I turned my attention to the state of the world. Via satellite, I saw major cities suffering through the catastrophe. New York was freezing over, and Tokyo was in the throes of riots. As nations declared states of emergency, official shelters began opening. I knew one of the largest shelters was located at the city's sports complex, but I also knew it wouldn't last long. There were too many people and too few supplies. Within a month, it would turn into a human prison. That is why I chose to hold out on my own. I ventured out from my stronghold to gather extra resources. Amidst the ruins, I encountered a pack of zombie dogs. I attacked immediately. The first monster fell with a single swing of my axe. The other 6 lunged at once. I dodged their attacks and used the momentum to strike at their vulnerable necks. After the fight, I found several gold crystals, sources of lost power and keys to human evolution. I pocketed them and headed to the hospital in search of medicine and antiviral serum. The hospital was already filled with corpses that could potentially reanimate. I grabbed my axe and cleared a path. Upon reaching the pharmacy, I took all the available medication. To me, these drugs were more valuable than gold. Suddenly, the sound of gunfire rang out from the floor below. A group of armed men had stormed the hospital. I recognized their insignia. They were members of the Black Shark Gang. I didn't go down right away. I knew their commotion would wake something far more dangerous. Sure enough, the floor in the center of the hall suddenly exploded outward. A 3-meter-tall monster emerged from the pile of corpses. Its body was covered in steel-gray muscle. Bullets couldn't stop it. The monster began slaughtering the gang members one by one. I simply waited. I knew the monster would eventually tire after a prolonged fight. As its body began to weaken, I descended from the 3rd floor, grabbed an explosive, and tossed it straight into the monster's gaping maw. A massive explosion shook the hospital. When the smoke cleared, the monster's head had been obliterated. I retrieved the power crystal from its body. The system informed me that it was a level 2 power crystal, so I decided to absorb it. A golden light began to envelop my body. I felt my bones cracking as pain surged through me, yet I held on. Moments later, the system leveled up and a new feature finally unlocked. Standing amidst the ruins of the hospital, I gazed out at a world transformed into hell. I recalled my past life, how I died because I trusted others too much and gave everything I owned to my younger sibling. This time, things would be different. I would not sacrifice my life for anyone. Instead, I would use the storage system to build my own strength.